I loved that you went to the Bolivian Amazon. Tell us a little bit about what you discovered there and how it relates to scarcity brain.
Yeah. So I think the first thing you need to know is that statistically, heart disease is what kills people.
Yeah.
Kills 50% of Americans, and it's increasingly killing people at younger ages. So I think that, I can't remember the exact stat off the top of my head, but I think it's over 50% of women over 20 have some indication of heart disease right now. Now, okay, we've just laid out that heart disease is probably what's going to kill you. But then when you look at what people actually worry about and Google Trends and what the media most covers, heart disease is like not even on the
Doesn't
list.
even make the list.
Like no one talks about it. In the book, I describe it as people mostly worry about cancer and they worry about violence. And those two things statistically are much lower than heart disease. So I describe it as playing Russian roulette and realizing you got a mole on your trigger finger and going, oh no, what about that mole though, you know? So I'd kind of been thinking about this. And what I really started thinking about heart disease was when I learned those statistics, that it's the big killer that no one cares about. And then I come across this study, and it found the group of people with the healthiest hearts ever recorded by science is this group called the Chamane tribe, and they're in the Bolivian Amazon. Now, I'm an investigative journalist, so I go places. So I get on a damn plane and I fly to La Paz, and it was pretty funny because I was supposed to fly to La Paz, which is the highest altitude international airport in the world. And then I was supposed to take this tiny little pack of gum plane down into the jungle. And the day before I get there, my sort of handler fixer calls me and they're like, we got bad news. The plane company, they went under. They're out of business. I'm like, all right. They're like, you're going to have to drive there with a driver. I'm like, okay, no problem. Now the flight was supposed to be a half an hour. This lady's like, yeah, so the drive is 12 hours. I'm like, what? Oh my God. And it's down these crazy cliff roads, and the driver is just blasting cumbia the whole time. So 12 hours of just like rocky roads and boom, chicka, boom, 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 chicka, boom, like just blasting.
That's a party, man. Yeah. That's a party.
And then from there, I take this canoe up into the jungle. It's like this 6-hour canoe ride. And we get there, walk into the jungle, and like there the tribe is. Right. And the first thing we do is they welcome me with a meal. And so I'm there to figure out, why are they so healthy? And it goes back to what they eat, it turns out. So what they eat is interesting because at some point in a given day, it's going to offend some diet that we've created over the last 40 years. Like it's not vegan, it's not paleo, it's not low fat, it's not low carb, it's not insert any diet you've heard of. But the one commonality all the food has is that it has just one ingredient. So they eat mostly like rice and potatoes and plantains, but they also eat red meat, they eat fish, they'll even eat sugar, but the difference is that they have to hike into the jungle and cut down the sugar cane and then like process it themselves, which, all right, they're not going to eat that much and they've just worked it off. They'll even eat chocolate. So it's really just that it has one ingredient. Now, when we sit down to eat, I will tell you that you're probably picturing like me in this amazing jungle, and the jungle was amazing with this like, locally made sourced food that's like something that you get in Brooklyn. Like, hell no, this food was terrible tasting. Like, I'm not going to lie. The plantains, totally fine. The rice, like, it's just the really bland rice, like every restaurant is like dumping in butter and salt. But the chicken was like terrible, because in the US we breed our chickens to be like really plump, and they're usually like 10 pounds. Like a wild chicken is like 3 pounds, and it's really stringy. So the food is not good. But what the takeaway is for the average person is not to eat terrible chicken and, terrible food. But what it is that, when we start to really process our food, like we start running all these schemes to feed a wide group of people, and that in turn requires a lot of ultra processing. And now the average American eats 60% ultra processed food. That seems to lead us to overeat, because it goes back to that scarcity loop that I mentioned, right? Our food is everywhere, and we evolved to eat more food when we had the opportunity. We've got all these unpredictable, amazing flavors on every corner. I mean, we're in New York right now. It's like, God, this is the best food city in the world. And we can eat it quicker. So when you hyper process a food, people naturally just eat it much faster. And they don't have that, right? It's all just single ingredient. It's not, every meal is not an explosion of sugar, salt, and fat. But that seems to lead them to not overeat. And in turn, they don't seem to get a lot of the diseases that kill us. So I think the takeaway for the average person is, how can I find ways to remove that food scarcity loop? And I'm not saying like, don't ever eat processed food again. Mm-hmm. I am saying that find as many meals as you can throughout the day that rely on sort of one ingredient foods. So something like oatmeal and eggs for breakfast. You know, for lunch, it might be like rice and some meat and some vegetables. And then, you know, by the end of the day, you're like, okay, I've eaten pretty well today. Now I can maybe have a couple things that are good.
Yeah. So you did it too. You ate that way. Was it for a month after
you came
back?
Yeah, it was for a month.
Yeah. And did you feel any challenge is good? I love giving myself like little challenges, whether it's for a week or 30 days or something like that. But did you notice, were there any foods that you were, you know, I use the word addicted very lightly, like kind of favorite foods that you would go through in a scarcity loop that started to fall away?
Reese's Puffs.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Cool. That one's the one that fell away.
That's my jam. But I did notice, so two things I really love is Reese's Puff cereal and diet soda. Uh-huh. And I did notice that after the month, when I went back to and had my first Reese's Puff, I was like, oh my God, this is so unbelievably sweet. Just because I was so adapted to how sweet that food was.
Yes.
That when I went off it and then returned to it, it was just like
shocking.
A smack in the face. It was shocking. And so really my takeaway is that it did change a lot of the meals and how I think about food. And I think it in a good way.
Yeah.